Greetings, this is Christine Bundy on Gibson County, Indiana for the Indiana Assembly, and this is for GenEd Wednesday. We're continuing with Brent Allan Winters' Declaration of 76, United States Constitution, and let's start with a moment of silence to honor our Creator. Okay, so let's go ahead. We want to start first with a review from last week. So we'll go through those questions and compared to the side by side with the reading. Okay, so for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, as it says here. Alright, and then we go here to King and his co-conspirators brought home and family the building blocks of colonial strength under martial law's direct surveillance and control. Sound familiar? In fact, soldiers quartered in homes become the very eyes and ears of state power, chilling and taking away enjoyment of common law's freedoms of speech and association. Clause 17, for protecting them by a mock trial for punishment for any murders of which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. Though soldiers are rightly under martial law, freedom demands that their murdering of non-military men and women were subject to the common law courts with its jury. Hence, in America, appeals from military courts are to federal courts. In the United States, soldiers and sailors are tried as all others in the common law court of the state having jurisdiction over felonies done within it. Clause 18, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. Here, our declaration cites King George's denial of the colonists' common right laws of freedom of association, which includes freedom of contract, and the inestimable benefits resulting from the free and unhampered exercise of these rights in trade and commerce. Clause 19, for imposing taxes on us without our consent. The due process, our law. Where is this one? The due process, our Constitution requires the government's exercise of its taxing powers to introduce and pass tax legislation to lay and collect taxes is due and owing each person. To sum up, ownership of property, such as money, is a constitutional protected right. Taxation is government's taking of property. Consequently, common law demands that government, in laying and collecting taxes, follow the law of the land. Due process in getting constitutional consent. Clause 20, for depriving us in many cases of benefits by trial by jury. Experience shows that without a true and impartial common law jury, government will control the outcome of cases, i.e. replacing its will for personal freedom. King George set up bureaucrats with unconstitutional powers to extend the jurisdiction of admiralty courts, not only for collecting taxes, but also for the trial of all cases arising within the colony. Our Declaration teaches, above all things, that the powers that be are creative without end in devising schemes to deny trial by jury. Clause 21, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. The common law tradition is against wholesale manufacturing of crimes by legislative decree. Civil law demands that one's private conscience yield to the state's will, commanded by its codes. Unlike the common law and civil law tradition, crimes are against the state, personified in its chief officer. Hence, all crimes are personal offenses against him, making punishments a matter of his personal vengeance instead of a reckoning according to the rule of law. Never forget a jury of one's peers are one's neighbors, those living about one's home. Clause 22, for abolishing the free system of English laws in neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries, so as to render it once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. What do you think they're doing in Canada? The British government's replacing of American common law courts with admiralty tribunals broke faith with British Americans. By the words, so total a dissimilarity of religion, law, and government of the neighboring British colonies, Congress refers to the Quebec Act, by which the King and Parliament were erected a tyranny of Roman civil canon law government in Quebec, the neighboring province. The words assistance of whose blood and treasure in said country was conquered from France refers to, let's see, right? Yeah. Refers to the British American colonies giving of wealth and lives in the French and Indian War. 112, once put in place, let's see, once put in place, that is in here, once put in place and accepted, domination and fleecing of its people is easier than using it as the fit instrument of absolute rule, planned to enlarge its boundaries, allowing its tentacles to grope, snatch, and bleed more and more colonists of their work and wealth. All right, now we'll go ahead and get into pages 43 or 43 to 50. Continuing with Declaration of 76, United States Constitution, a common lawyer comments, clause by Brent Allan Winters, pages 43 to 50. Clause 23, for taking away charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments. Comment. America's earliest founders, English Puritans, Dutch and German Reformed groups, Scottish-Irish Presbyterians, believed the promises of Scripture were a species of common law contract called covenants. These covenants, they said, were the stuff that held together common law government, i.e., government by consent of the governed. Further, where the governing party breached such a covenant, the relationship ended. Indeed, the law of contracts promises is the guts of the common law. Thus, in order to have lawful government, our first fathers requested and received charters from the Crown, ensuring their common law rights, including the rights of local government. These charters, being promises common law recognized and enforced, were contracts. Because the Crown breached these contracts, the common law released colonists from allegiance to the Crown. Our Constitution later barred any state from altering any obligation of contracts, allowing only the general government to do so through bankruptcy laws. See U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1. Later still, the Supreme Court in Dartmouth College also found that these colonial charters are contracts indeed, and as such, our Constitution's contract clause bars state legislatures from altering them. Each colonial charter granted rights of self-government. Therefore, to take away the colonies' charters was to take away the colonies' rights to govern themselves. Our Declaration is the British American colonies' official withdrawal of allegiance from England in response to the English sovereigns taking away their charters, i.e., breaching his promises. A few centuries before, Parliament called such common law right to withdraw allegiance to the king diffidatio, signifying despair of trust. The king's broken promise, however, justified withdrawal of allegiance, only if it caused serious injury. If serious injury was shown, common law entitled the injured party to end the relationship by diffidatio, a solemn and open gesture of defiance toward the king's misuse of power. Diffidatio is a right inherent in the common law's ideals of limited government. The American colonies' gesture of defiance toward British abuse of power was the signing of a declaration. For near 10 years, England had many times broken faith with the American colonies, not only according to common law custom, law unwritten, but also according to colonial charters, law written. England's Glanville in 1187 first set forth the power-limiting principle of diffidatio. No person owes his king any more than his king owes him, reverence alone excepted. And if the king breaks faith, he releases that person from his obligation of loyalty to the king. Indeed, our declaration was no new idea. Over a century before, Scotsmen signed their solemn leagues and covenants according to the same diffidatio principle. Your duty of loyalty to our Constitution and true law is fixed. However, obligation to those in government ends when their hostility to our Constitution causes you serious injury, for which you have no genuine opportunity to remedy. Clause 24. For suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. Comment. Common law requires self and local government. The closer to home, the better. By using the pronoun themselves, this Clause 24 harks back to King George's co-conspirators of Clause 15. East India Company agents, exchequer revenuers, clerks, and dependents, beneficiaries of British mercantilism. Like Marxism, mercantilism says a man or country will profit only by the loss of others. Let that sink in. Like Marxism, mercantilism says a man or country will profit only by the loss of others. Parliament, after defeating the Royalists during the 17th century, took English sovereignty to itself by making the Crown a part of Parliament. The common law tradition, however, allows no place for total state power to legislate in all cases whatsoever, as Congress now does, passing acts far beyond the few limited powers our Constitution gives it. Thus, inherent in the colonial charters is the authority of each colony to establish its own laws. For example, the Pilgrims, bad weather having driven them off course, landed where their crown charter gave no authority. They therefore fashioned the Mayflower Compact using common law principles fitting their needs in the wilderness. All other colonies followed suit, and for the next 166 years, Parliament, enjoying the wealth that the colonials' free relationships of contract and trade brought, by its silence had agreed that the common law applied on American soil. But by the time King George tried to change the colony's 166-year-old course of prosperity, it was too late. Clause 25. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. Comment. King George, by declaring the colonists out of his protection, condemned them under common law's outlawry, the sentence of death pronounced, write Pollock and Maitland, where there are no police constables or professional hangmen. To pursue the outlaw and knock him on the head is as though he were a wild beast, was the right and duty of every law-abiding man. In fact, many colonists sought the king's favor and reward by turning on the outlawed patriots, hunting them down and killing them. King George sent his army and mercenaries to murder them. In short, King George meant his declaration of outlawry against the Americans to put them clean outside the protection of the common law. To even harbor the outlawed was unlawful, thus the common law called him an outlaw. However, according to common law's outlawry, even the king's false declaration was not enough to justify the colony's separation from him. To be sure, the king's declaration put loyal colonists in real danger. Separation, however, demanded that the colonies show real injury, and clauses 26 to 29 fills that bill. While clauses 2 to 24 show injury by indirect means through deceit, scheming, manipulation, and abusive working of the courts and law, clauses 25 to 29 show direct, open, high-handed and notorious acts of war, murder, kidnapping, plundering, and terrorism done in treachery. Perfidy, clause 27. And cruelty. Records of British murder of the colonials reveal merciless brutality, hunting down colonial patriots as though wild beasts to be killed for sport. Because King George had bound himself to the colonies and they to him by his denying them the common law's protection, he broke faith. See clause 23 above. The colonies were, therefore, within their rights, even duty-bound to break loyalty to him. In fact, this clause 25 says that King George, by waging undeclared war against the British American colonies, resigned from governing them. Thus, not only did King George break faith by denying the protection of the common law, he sent his army and navy, Hessian mercenaries, and the Indian tribes against the colonies to destroy them. Of note, a few years later, Continental soldier J.P. Martin recounts the prowess of Indian archer units of the Continental Army. Nevertheless, the American colonies never revolted. Our war for separation was no revolution, but a war of necessity and self-defense just before God and the world. Clause 26. He has plundered our seas, ravaged coasts, burned our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. Comment. These accusations are strong yet true. On August 23rd, George III issued a proclamation declaring that all 13 American colonies were in a state of open rebellion. In October 1775, British forces burned Falmouth, presently Portland, Maine. In a word, the British had reverted to the brutalities of her early Scandinavian immigrants. As many other government, and the only tool king and parliament had to dominate her colonies was force and the threat of force. Indeed, says Washington, government is neither reason nor eloquence, but force. If people, however, refuse to knuckle under such threat and force, government has no other tool but to ratchet up its force to the level of brutality. Clause 27. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with the circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. Comment. The foreign mercenaries to which this paragraph refers are the dreaded German Hessians. King George, being Elector of Hanover, was a German prince. Being King of Great Britain, he was also an English prince. Thus, the Hessians he sent to subdue the colonies were his German subjects. By a cabal of statecraft, he leased the Hessians from himself as a German prince, and then leased them to himself as a prince of England. The transaction was not only profitable to him and the banks in which he invested, but risk-free. As a German prince, George demanded a large lease payment for the Hessians. As King of Great Britain, he borrowed that payment from England's central bank and laid the interest payments on the backs of the British. Then, as a German prince, he received that lease payment for his Hessian soldiers and invested it in Germany's central bank, which owned England's central bank. Thus, using enslaved Hessians, he enslaved the British to the bankers through debt, and then tried to use the Hessians to enslave the colonists to the same cabal of theft. Such shenanigans the common law abhors. By this self-dealing sham, King George not only cinched the worth of his bank investment on the backs of the British for years to come, but also cinched profits and power for the German-English bankers' cartel. Bottom line, bankers enslaved a people by debt. Their tool is the presumptive silly they call useful idiot, enslaving himself to their sham in exchange for false feelings of security. The mercenary is a combatant hired by lease from or lent out to someone other than the mercenary's own government to fight in a foreign war. The civil law state decrees absolute power over its military draftees, trafficking in their lives and services, selling, leasing, and loaning its soldiers and sailors, bureaucrats, even doing favors and paying personal debts with their lives and services. The use of mercenaries, though found in the history of common law countries, has never been a part of the common law tradition. The mercenary fights on command for profit for himself, his master, or both. By contrast, the non-mercenary fights for his rights and those of his family, neighbors, and countrymen. If he receives pay while doing so, he considers himself fortunate. In the past, the United States has neither employed mercenaries nor let their sons out as mercenaries. American submission to the will of international organizations, however, threatens this tradition. Joseph Plum Martin was once a young Continental soldier. Years later, as an old veteran of the American War of Independence from Britain, he recalled his discovery of the unburied remains of Hessian mercenaries a full year after pitched battle against them. He spoke in outrage of their servile condition to which statist mercenary trade had reduced the Hessians. Because Britain's King George III was also a German prince, the Hessians he sent to subdue England's American colonies were his subjects. J.P. Martin believed that the use of mercenaries is about a symptom of a greater evil: total state power over men. In hindsight of decades past, Martin recalled his feelings upon discovering the remains of the Hessian foes, providing good rebuke for Americans yet to come. I, with some of my comrades who were in the Battle of the White Plains in the year 76, one day took a ramble in the ground where we were then engaged with the British. We saw a number of the graves of those who had fell in that battle. Some of the bodies had been so slightly buried that the dogs or hogs or both had dug them out of the ground. Their skulls and their bones and hair were scattered about the place. Here were Hessians' skulls as thick as bombshell. Poor fellows. They were left unburied in a foreign land. They had perhaps as near and dear friends to lament their sad destiny as the Americans who laid buried near them. But they should have kept at home. We should then never have gone after them to kill them in their own country. But the reader will say they were forced to come and be killed here, forced by their rulers who have absolute power of life and death over their subjects. Well then, reader, bless a kind providence that has made such a distinction between your condition and theirs. And be careful too that you do not allow yourself to be brought to such an abject servile condition. Bold and original. The abject servile condition of which J.P. Martin here speaks is that of those subjects to rulers who conscript and sell their subjects' lives in military services to a foreign power or under officers. The Hessians fighting Americans were enslaved to George III, not only a German prince but also a king of England. The lives of the Hessians, feared by all for their ruthless prowess in battle, were sold to King George for money. Such slavery now threatens America's armed forces as our government puts her sons and even daughters under command of United Nations foreign officers. This clause refers to circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, because king and parliament, unable to subdue the colonies by threats or force, planned terrorism, infused the smallpox virus into the colonies through the slave population. General Washington, having learnt of this barbarity, having himself survived the pox when young, vaccinated the Continental Army, knowing that though 10% would die from it, without it, the Brits' germ warfare would kill 90%. Because vaccination disabled each man for about 2 weeks with scabbing and general discomfort, Washington staggered vaccination of the army group by group. The colonial soldiers' selfless assent to this dangerous misery bespeaks his loyalty.
Okay. So here are the study guide questions for this group of pages and section of clauses. We'll read through it so that you can be able to have it and screenshot, and you can go back into the recording as well as the separate recording on YouTube of the audio that you can go in and look at the text to be able to support the answers here. So Clause 23 for taking away charters, abolishing our most blank laws and blank fundamentally the forms of our governments. Question 115, further where the governing party blank such a covenant, the blank ended. 116, thus in order to have blank government, our first fathers requested and received charters from the crown, ensuring their common law rights, including the rights of blank government. 117, because the crown blank these contracts, the common law released colonists from blank to the crown. 118, our Constitution later barred any state from altering any blank of blank, allowing only the general government to do so through bankruptcy laws. Interesting, bankruptcy laws. 119, our declaration is the British American colony's official blank of blank from England in response to the English sovereign's taking away their charters, i.e., breaching his promises. Question 120, the American colony's blank of blank toward British abuse of power was the blank of our declaration. Clause 24, for blank, our own blank, in declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. Question 122, for example, the blank, bad weather having driven them off course, landed where their blank charter gave no blank. Question 123, all other blank followed suit, and for the next blank years, Parliament enjoyed the wealth that the colonials' free relationships of contract and trade brought by its blank had agreed that the common law applied on American soil. Clause 25, question 124, he has blank government here by declaring us out of his blank and waging blank against us. Question 125, in fact, many colonists sought the king's favor and reward by turning on the outlawed blank. Blank them down and blank them. King George sent his army and mercenaries to murder them. Question 126. Records of British blank of colonials reveal merciless blank, hunting down colonial patriots as though wild beasts to be killed for blank. 127. Thus, not only did King George break blank by denying the blank of common law, he sent his army and navy, Hessian mercenaries, and the Indian tribes against the colonies to destroy them. Clause 26, he has plundered our seas, blank coasts, burned our towns, and blanked the lives of our people. That's still going on today, right? All of our seas have been spoiled in some form or another. Towns have been burning. The coasts are eroding, right? Question 129. George III issued a blank declaring that all blank American colonies were in a state of open blank. 130. Indeed, says blank, government is neither blank nor eloquence, but blank. Clause 127. Question 131, Clause 27. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign blank to complete the works of death, dissolution, and blank, already begun with the circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. Question 132. Thus, using enslaved Hessians, he enslaved the British to the bankers through debt and then tried to use the Hessian to blank the blank to the same cabal of theft. 133. Bottom line. Bankers blank a people by blank. Their tool is the presumptive silly they call useful idiot. Pay attention. They're calling you useful idiot because you're useful to them and you are idiots because it's only because you don't know what they're doing. Question 134. The civil law state decrees absolute power over its blank draftees, trafficking in their lives and services, selling, leasing, and loaning its soldiers and sailors. Question 134. The civil law state decrees Question 135. The use of blank, though found in the history of common law countries, has never been a part of the common law blank. Question 136. In the past, the United States has neither blank mercenaries nor let her blank out as mercenaries. 137. The lives of the Haitians, feared by all for their blank prowess in battle, were blank to King George for money. 138. King and Parliament, unable to blank the colonies by threats or force, planned terrorism, infuse the blank blank virus into the colonies through the blank population. So what did they just try to do with swine flu back in the early 2000s? And then the not vid co, right? Same exact thing, nothing's changed. And that's because they're not creative enough to come up with anything new. It's the same exact playbook. So if we already have the playbook, how come nobody's not jumping on trying to straighten it up? We already know the playbook. Okay. Again, so every other Monday, and not this Monday, but next Monday, again, will be our special guest, Joe, on Kentucky. He is the Postal Area 4 Chief for Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky. He is also the PKTF Director. PKTF is Peacekeeper Task Force for the Federation. He has dedicated this every other Monday evening to the Indiana Assembly to support us building all 4 pillars of the Assembly. These calls are not for personal remedy. These calls are for building the Assembly. If you're interested and you are or at least papered up, you'll have received an email for you to put your name on that email list to be able to get the Zoom link. Otherwise, because again, it's for actively participating in the build. If you are right now ready, willing, and able, not coming with excuses of why you can't do anything yet. When you're actually ready and you can come to the table ready to do some action, make sure you put your name on that email list so that we can get you the Zoom link and you can join us on these calls and start actively participating in this build. Otherwise, if you're just wanting to be that fly on the wall to keep up with things, here are the 4 social media platforms that we're currently running on: Locals, Odyssey, Rumble, and YouTube. And here is a link that if you wanted to, because you've been watching the social media links and everything, you're welcome to go right here to be able to give a gift to help keep this work here for the Assembly going. Many want to say, how come we got to charge? Well, there's costs to everything. Where do you think it's going to come from? It cannot just come out of air to cover the costs of the technology, the paper, the ink, the seals, and all of this. So really, you're asking for, why do you have to pay? Why does it have to cost any money? Then go read Anna's articles all about nanny state, because I think that's really what you're looking for, is a nanny state. Not here because we actually are standing up to take care of ourselves, and we have the knowledge that there are costs involved, regardless of who's performing the services. Therefore, those fees should still be paid. Whether you're paying them to the U.S. Postal Service to pay for that piece of mail to go through, you still want to have your documents published to a public record. How do you think the cost of those servers are supposed to get paid? It's not like the U.S. government and the state of Indiana. So don't think that there's just this hidden pot somewhere that can be just tapped into it. You, the people, have to support your assembly. You got to figure that out. If you're just looking for a free ride, there are district and municipal assemblies out there that are right there willing to help and support you in doing that. But you're not getting it here. We're here because we're mature grown-ups. We're not in a body that looks like an adult with an age that says that we should be an adult, but yet we really haven't grown up and matured yet to actually step up and do the work that's necessary. I'm looking for those that are ready to start actually doing the building, the mature building of the assembly, so that we can actually start bringing this back into where it should be, course correcting. Okay. All right. So again, here we've got the links here for that. It's because the General Assembly calls are also going to be played on these YouTube or the social media platforms with the exception of Locals. Locals wants to use the webcam and cannot share that cam with Zoom. So anytime there's a Zoom call that's being recorded out to the social media platforms, Locals is not going to be able to have that live call because it can't share the camera for that aspect. But like the GenEd, these calls here, they're not going through Zoom, so I'm able to broadcast across Locals too. Again, here are those links. If you know of other platforms that offer live stream and chat functions, email records@theindianaassembly.org. Also, if you have paperwork to present, you can email it to records@theindianaassembly.org. Okay, but do not send photos. Send them in a PDF document and match up things. If it's the IRS letter to New York, include in that same document the postage paid receipt that sends it to New York. Include it in that document. And then the second one be your DC letter with the DC postage. Okay? Don't send multiple files that are all photos and then expect me to figure out and put in the correct order for you of what goes with what. And please don't send pictures of photos. You're just wasting your camera space and sending in everything, because I'm not going to. The proof of taking a picture of the photo is no proof. Okay? Of the envelope. That's not proof. The actual paid receipt is proof. Or the green card back is proof. Okay? None more games of making copies of the envelope with the postage on it. Okay. Alright, so if you go to this link, you can click the tab at the top for donate, and you can either do one-time gift of whatever amount that you're able to do, or you can set up monthly payments. If you wanted to donate to specific things, they're available there for you as well. If you wanted to send cash or money order, again, all gifts, including products and services, are considered non-refundable. They are gladly accepted and all benefits waived. If you did want to send cash or money order, make payable to Christine Van Pelt. That is my married name, Van Pelt, and it is all in my documentation that it is all there, that I have ownership of that. And that is because it's the state of Indiana ID, so that I could be able to cash the money orders. All right, here are links for the Debt Redemption Center, so you can start diving into that. Note that if you have not corrected your status, it's going to be all over crazy for you, as well as you could put yourself into potential danger, because this is not available to U.S. citizens, because U.S. citizens are responsible for the debt. So you're not getting out of it if you're still considered a U.S. citizen, and it can actually get you into trouble. All right, if you want a free consult or to record and publish, you can go here to schedule. But also note, consult is not a recording, so don't look for a recording that actually should have a fee, and you're looking for a free consult. The service still costs $30, or the service fees for recording. There's still work that's involved that has to do that. Me, the living woman, still also has work to be. I have paper to print, because I've got to make sure that the labels are on there, the seals are on there. Okay, you would not be doing any of that work for free, and I'm actually still doing it for free, because all of those recording fees go right back into making sure that we have the paper, we have the supplies that we need, have the electronic devices going on, having the drive to be on web drive to be able to store everything. There are costs involved. It's not a free ride. If you're looking for a free ride, again, there are district and municipal assemblies out there that are willing to support your nanny state needs. All right. And here again is the link to schedule directly with me for a consult. All right. So we will see you. We'll wrap this up here. And again, next week's call, we will be finishing up. We'll go through the answers to those questions for the reading for this week, and then we'll play the reading for next week, and then we'll give the study guide questions. Next week finishes up the Declaration of 76 portion, and we'll be then moving into the Constitution. All right, I wish you all peace and love, and have a great day.